It was just before midnight on August 30, 2011, when Officer Kenneth Blue of the Buena Vista Township, New Jersey Police Department made a chilling discovery. While patrolling a quiet, rural road near the department's gun range, he spotted a Pontiac Aztek with one door eerily hanging open. Inside, he found the lifeless body of 32-year-old Jennifer Webb. Kenneth, along with his colleague Officer Tim Patterson, quickly processed the scene. Nearby, they found Jennifer's driver's license, purse, and cell phone, along with a typed note, seemingly a suicide letter. It appeared, at first glance, to be a tragic case of self-harm. However, the initial assessment was tragically wrong. An autopsy revealed Jennifer had not taken her own life, she was strangled. Someone had meticulously rearranged the crime scene to mislead investigators, turning a presumed suicide into a clear-cut murder. The investigation swiftly shifted. Detectives began tracing Jennifer's final hours, following digital breadcrumbs from her cell phone. What they uncovered was a shocking scandal that rocked the small-town department. One name repeatedly surfaced in Jennifer's call logs: Ken Blue. When investigators traced the number, it belonged to their own Officer Kenneth Blue, the man who had found her body. As police spoke with Jennifer's friends and family, the truth solidified. Jennifer had been involved in a secret affair with a married officer and father. More devastating still, she was expecting a child. Kenneth Blue, now no longer just a discoverer but a prime suspect, was brought in for questioning by his own brothers-in-arms. The case, transformed into a deeply personal and unsettling ordeal for the entire department, was a fellow officer, sworn to uphold the law, a stone-cold killer. Seated across from his colleagues, Kenneth began to recount his version of events from that night. He described his patrol route, checking different areas, including the gun range. Upon seeing the parked vehicle, he illuminated it with his spotlight, looking for movement. Seeing none, he turned his patrol car around to get a better view. He then drove behind the Aztek, shining his spotlight, as Officer Patterson arrived. Kenneth detailed approaching the car, noticing the open driver's side rear door. A few more steps revealed Jennifer Webb lying on the ground. He immediately called out to Patterson, saying, "Hey, we got a body." He recalled stepping back as Patterson approached. They found Jennifer's purse and, upon opening it to identify the driver, Kenneth discovered a folded typed note. He set it aside, continuing to search the wallet until he found her ID. It was at that moment, he claimed, he recognized her. "Oh, I know this girl," he told Patterson, then stepped away, allowing others to take over. Kenneth's account seemed straightforward, perhaps too simple. Despite his claim of recognizing Jennifer and stepping back, he had already involved himself significantly. His colleagues sensed he was holding back. During the interrogation, detectives pressed him on his relationship with Jennifer. Kenneth admitted knowing her for over 10 years, meeting her while doing bar checks in Holland. He described her as a regular patron at the backstreet bar, where he became familiar with the staff and patrons. He characterized their connection as a casual friendship, touch and go over the years, with periods of infrequent contact. When asked about Jennifer's marital status or if she had children, Kenneth stated she was not married, but confirmed she was pregnant. He denied knowing if she had a boyfriend at the time of her death. His recollection of their last conversations was notably vague and inconsistent. He initially struggled to remember if she called him or he called her, or even when their last contact was. After some prompting, he recalled Jennifer calling him the previous night, leaving a message asking him to call her back. He claimed he returned the call around 8 or 8:30 p.m. but received no answer and left no voicemail. He could not recall her calling back. Kenneth also described Jennifer's mood in recent months as not normal. Usually she was a happy, jovial person, but lately, she had been tired and unlike herself. He attributed this change to the stress of a recent break-in, living with her parents, and her pregnancy, comparing her moodiness to his own wife's during pregnancy. Yet, his responses regarding the timeline of their last communication remained evasive, shifting between last night, day before yesterday, and finally settling on Monday for their last actual conversation. This caginess only intensified the detective's suspicions. Kenneth's recollection of his last in-person sighting of Jennifer proved just as elusive as their final communication. He estimated it had been 3 weeks or so, a fleeting moment when Jennifer, on her way home from an outing with friends or her brother, had briefly pulled over to greet him. Their meetings, he claimed, were infrequent, occurring perhaps once or twice, maybe 3 times a month. Despite his close acquaintance, he continued to describe her recent demeanor as strikingly altered, reiterating that she seemed more stressed, tired all the time, a stark contrast to the bubbly, outgoing person he once knew. She had become notably more reserved, a change he found unusual, given her typically open nature. When pressed about Jennifer's pregnancy, Kenneth adopted a detached air. He stated he rarely delved into specifics, merely inquiring about her and the baby's well-being. "It's none of my business," he asserted, claiming he didn't want to pry into her personal life that much. He maintained that Jennifer only volunteered minimal information, typically just that baby's healthy and I'm doing good, leaving it at that. Yet, this reticence from Jennifer, a woman he described as someone who talked all the time about anything and everything, struck detectives as peculiar. Kenneth speculated that she must have been dealing with more than what she told me, hinting at underlying struggles. He then surprisingly recalled specific elements from the suicide note: robberies, pregnancy, being sorry, and feelings of being a failure or lying to people. When asked what she might have been lying about, Kenneth simply replied, "I don't know." The detectives honed in on the nature of their relationship. "Did you have a physical relationship with her?" They probed directly. Kenneth's answer was an emphatic, "No." He affirmed his marital status, attempting to close that line of inquiry. However, the layers of Kenneth's story began to peel away. His assertion of not recognizing Jennifer or her distinctive car at the crime scene, despite their decade-long relationship, strained credulity. He defended himself by invoking cop mode, a mental state where, he claimed, an officer focuses solely on procedural tasks rather than personal recognition. His primary concern, he stated, was looking inside for bodies, not at the outside of the car for decorations. He further elaborated that he was accustomed to seeing Jennifer with her hair done, not in a disheveled state, attempting to explain his blindness to her identity at the scene. This detail inadvertently revealed a level of familiarity that contradicted his earlier detachment. Then came another glaring inconsistency concerning the suicide note. While Kenneth confirmed he wore gloves when initially retrieving the note from Jennifer's purse, he conceded that he likely removed them before handing the crucial piece of evidence to another officer, potentially contaminating it with his own fingerprints. He even implied his partner, Tim, might have touched it as well. Such a breach of basic evidence protocol, coming from an experienced officer, was highly suspicious. As the interrogation paused for a brief bathroom break, Kenneth, perhaps feeling the pressure, casually exited the room to chat with unaware colleagues, maintaining a facade of normalcy. But upon detectives' return, the air in the room grew heavy with an unspoken accusation. The lead detective's next question was direct, piercing through Kenneth's deflections. "Jennifer, who was the father of that child?" Kenneth, still holding firm to his story, declared, "No. None." He reiterated his denial of a physical relationship and claimed Jennifer never confided in him about the child's father. But the detectives were ready. "She has told people that you're the father of that child," they countered, their words carrying the weight of certainty. "Her family was well aware of who the father of that child was. They didn't know you personally, but was well aware of what your name was, where you worked, what you did, and everything." The revelation landed with the force of a hammer blow. Kenneth's confident demeanor crumbled. He stammered, Wow. No possibility of that." Yet his denial now seemed desperate, his earlier composure replaced by visible shock. The detectives, seeing his reaction, underscored the ease with which paternity could be scientifically confirmed, leaving Kenneth's protest sounding hollow and desperate. The detectives had delivered a crushing blow regarding the paternity of Jennifer's unborn child. They pressed Kenneth further, explaining that scientific analysis would soon confirm the truth, making any continued denial futile. His evasiveness on this insignificant matter, they pointed out, immediately raised questions about his honesty in every other aspect of the investigation. Kenneth weakly reiterated his belief that the child could not be his, but his conviction was clearly wavering, undermined by the certainty in the officers' voices. They also revealed a troubling detail: a period that morning when no one, neither dispatch nor colleagues, could reach him by radio or through their in-vehicle terminals. Kenneth dismissed this as a mere 5-minute lapse, but the detectives sensed another inconsistency. The interrogation then shifted to Jennifer's body and the crime scene. Detectives expressed their incredulity at Kenneth's claim of not recognizing Jennifer's vehicle, or even her, as he approached the scene. "You've known her for 10 years, one detective stated, "and that's the only car you've ever seen her drive. How could he park, walk over, and observe her lifeless body, detailing purple lips and no rise or fall in her chest, yet still not identify a woman he supposedly knew?" Kenneth struggled to justify his story, insisting that it all happened within a matter of minutes, a detail the detectives found difficult to reconcile with his detailed observations. He maintained that he had never met Jennifer at this secluded location before, stating she preferred public places, raising the question of why she would have been there that night. Then came another bombshell. Jennifer had told her family she was meeting Kenneth that evening. His repeated claims of not having spoken to her that day were swiftly disproven by call logs showing a conversation between them shortly before her death. The weight of this mounting evidence, particularly the confirmed paternity, and the family statement, brought Jennifer's earlier letter into stark focus. Kenneth's initial confusion about her references to a married man vanished as he realized the detectives understood the implication. "She was talking about me," he uttered, his voice barely a whisper. The realization that Jennifer had named him as the married father, and that her family was aware of his identity and occupation, further dismantled his carefully constructed narrative. With his story unraveling, detectives formally requested the uniform Kenneth had worn to the scene for forensic analysis. They made it clear that they needed to cover all bases and avoid any surprises. They were also profoundly skeptical of Jennifer's death being a suicide, especially given her advanced pregnancy. It doesn't fit right, especially with how many females you ever know that hang themselves. One detective challenged. Kenneth clung to his denial, conceding only that something went terribly wrong with her, but steadfastly claiming no part in it. The detectives then laid out their case. Strong circumstantial evidence pointed squarely at him, or at least indicated he knew far more than he was admitting. His alleged secret relationship, the impending birth of a child, and the potential need to conceal it from his wife, painted a clear motive for murder, a scenario as old as time. The investigation was far from over. Detectives outlined the extensive forensic work ahead: cell phone records, text messages, emails, computer data, surveillance video from his patrol route to establish a timeline, and dispatch records. They also casually asked about an AVL device in his patrol car, an automatic vehicle location system that would pinpoint his exact movements. Kenneth's blank stare confirmed he had no such device. They urged him, one last time, to disclose any embarrassing things or surprises now, before the irrefutable truth emerged from their labs. They hinted at other injuries Jennifer sustained, and noted Kenneth himself had injuries with no witnesses. Despite the gravity of the situation, the detectives conveyed their personal discomfort, stating it was difficult to interrogate one of their own, a colleague with a good reputation. Kenneth, now overwhelmed, simply replied, "I don't know what to tell you guys." Finally, Kenneth admitted that he had offered Jennifer financial assistance for the child, explaining it as helping a struggling friend. But the detectives immediately seized on this, questioning the extent of a friendship that would lead a married man to offer financial support for an illegitimate child, especially one he denied fathering. The walls were closing in. The walls were closing in, and the detectives pressed Kenneth on his increasingly implausible claims. How could he, a man who offered financial aid for an illegitimate child, profess not to recognize Jennifer's brutally murdered body at the crime scene? Kenneth's composure frayed as he admitted the gruesome sight had made him physically ill, forcing him to walk away. He struggled to reconcile knowing Jennifer personally for years with his failure to identify her amidst the horror, his story losing all coherence under the relentless questioning. Detectives underscored the strangeness of his financial offer, stating it went beyond a simple platonic friendship, making it downright suspicious. The interrogation then pivoted to Kenneth's personal life, specifically his wife's awareness of his friendship with Jennifer. He insisted she was aware, framing it as an open relationship where both maintained friendships with the opposite sex. Yet, the detectives probed deeper. Did she know Jennifer by name, or was it just a general acceptance of his female acquaintances? Kenneth confirmed his wife knew Jennifer specifically. This was another thread of his carefully constructed narrative beginning to fray, raising flags about the full truth of his relationships. Under immense pressure, and with the tangible evidence of his own injuries now documented by investigators, Kenneth finally conceded. His relationship with Jennifer was indeed far more intimate than he had initially portrayed. He admitted to having slept with her. While he couldn't recall if Jennifer had ever explicitly told him the baby was his, he acknowledged that her advanced pregnancy, estimated at 8 months and placing conception around January, meant he was a possible father. He attempted to explain his prolonged deception by referencing a past affair he and his wife had successfully navigated years prior, stating he desperately wished to avoid jeopardizing his marriage again. The intimate encounter with Jennifer, he claimed, just kind of happened, a cliched and unconvincing explanation that seemed to echo his earlier evasiveness. The detectives made it abundantly clear that while his admission of intimacy was a significant step, the larger issue was his continued pattern of dishonesty. Concealing such a crucial fact, they warned, was a small misstep compared to deliberately withholding it, an act that now cast a grave shadow of deception over everything he'd stated. They urged him to reveal any other untruths immediately, stressing the consequences not just for him, but for their entire department if more evidence of deception emerged. They moved on to physical evidence, questioning him about scratches on Jennifer's body that looked like fingernail marks and the distinct possibility of finding her DNA under his nails, or his DNA on her person or clothing. Kenneth steadfastly maintained he wasn't there. He was also asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph test and if he had met Jennifer or spoken to her by phone on the night of her death. He denied meeting her or having any specific phone conversation about a meeting that night. When confronted directly about whether he could be the child's biological father, Kenneth finally conceded, "Yeah, it's probably possible." As it turned out, Kenneth being the father was not just possible. It was a biological fact that, combined with the irrefutable truth emerging from forensic labs and digital records, sealed his fate. Cell phone data showed multiple calls between Kenneth and Jennifer around the time of her murder. More damningly, Kenneth's DNA and fingerprints were discovered on Jennifer's clothing and inside her vehicle. The picture painted was clear and undeniable. Kenneth Blue was subsequently charged with first-degree premeditated murder, alongside additional charges for assault and felony firearm possession. He was found guilty and received a mandatory sentence of life without parole. The man who had meticulously portrayed himself as a concerned, respectable colleague and a loyal husband, initially navigating a friendship, was ultimately unmasked as a calculated murderer. He had silenced Jennifer Webb and their unborn child in a desperate attempt to protect his carefully crafted life, but his web of deception ultimately proved his undoing. What drives someone to commit such a heinous act to conceal a secret? And do you believe justice was truly served in this case?